Created from the union of earth and rock, trolls emerged from the depths of the mountains thousands of years ago and lived in harmony alongside humans for a long time. However, when a new world order took hold in Europe, things began to change. In Norway, a new king, known as Saint Olav, was given the mission of Christianizing the country, and according to the new belief, there was no place for such primitive beings on earth. Through an expedition into the forests, Olav managed to drag the trolls out of the mountains and expose them to the sun. Upon contact with sunlight, these creatures were turned to stone and swept from the planet. Since childhood, Nora had heard these stories from her father and grew up believing that trolls really existed. However, over time, she came to the conclusion that these were nothing more than fantasy stories. 30 years later, Nora's cabin is invaded by a government agent, and she attacks the intruder, but soon recognizes his voice and realizes that she is facing Andreas Isaacson, a former co-worker. After confirming that Nora is involved in a new project, the man invites her to do some work for the government. The last time they saw each other, they worked on the same team to capture a troll that was on the loose in the mountains of Norway, and after seeing what the government decided to do with it, Nora decided to abandon the project. However, this time, the agents have discovered the existence of an even bigger and more threatening troll than the first, and to honor her father's memory and work, Nora decides to help. While in the helicopter being transported to the mountains, the woman signs a confidentiality agreement, as she cannot speak publicly about the mission she is about to undertake. Upon arriving in Vemork, Nora meets Professors Muller and Wangle and is taken to see the troll they helped capture. In honor of the primordial trolls of mythology, the scientists decided to name him Jodin and installed UV lights around the facility to turn him to stone in an instant if he wakes up. Suddenly, Dr. Marion appears and introduces herself as the leader of the project. She has a PhD in evolutionary biology and has been leading the research for 2 years. According to her, Jodin is not eliminated, but hibernating, as a heartbeat has been detected in his body. As his pulse is low, he remains unconscious, which has allowed several studies to be carried out. After extensive DNA analysis, scientists have concluded that trolls are closer to trees than to humans. Before starting work, Andreas takes Nora to meet Siggy and reveals that they are expecting a baby. Upon receiving the news, the woman is surprised, as she had no idea that her former colleagues had gotten married. Andreas then reveals that his team has managed to recover several ancient documents that mention the existence of trolls, including Saint Olav's troll law. The document is incomplete, as one of the pieces of the sheet has been lost. However, Saint Olav's intention with that law is still very clear, as the document states that trolls must be expelled from Earth. Upon reading the document, Nora realizes that her father's stories were always true, and decides to take a closer look at that giant. After touching him, the woman begins to hum an old song, and Jodin's pulse begins to quicken. Suddenly, without anyone expecting it, the troll opens his eyes and Nora is paralyzed as she watches him. Witnessing the creature's awakening, the scientists prepare UV lights to turn him back into stone before Jodin can break free from his chains. However, in an attempt to prevent her specimen from being destroyed, Marion spills water on the control panel, causing a short circuit that prevents the lights from turning on. At that moment, Nora runs to the elevator, and all the employees begin to mobilize to abandon the facility. Thanks to his impressive strength, Jodin manages to break free from his chains and accidentally destroys the elevator. Luckily, even after the fall, Nora manages to survive, and Andreas helps her free herself. At that moment, they see Dr. Wangle being crushed by the troll and use a shortcut to escape from the bunker. Upon reaching the outside, the team sees Jodin destroying the walls of the facility and realizes that he has managed to free himself. Feeling the snow falling on his skin, the giant realizes he is in his natural habitat and walks toward the forest. Hours later, Major Chris and his men show up to take the team to meet Prime Minister Brinchman. During the meeting, the scientists are informed of the government's decision to eliminate the troll to ensure the safety of the Norwegian people, and Nora is forced to watch the same mistake repeat itself without being able to do anything about it. After a few minutes of reflection, the woman decides to take action and invites Andreas to accompany her on an adventure. After convincing Chris to take her on the capture mission, Nora and her partner board a military helicopter equipped with UV lights, and Marion decides to accompany them. That night, a crowd of young Norwegians are having fun at an electronic music party when suddenly the floor begins to shake and a monster destroys the ceiling. Seeing the creature invading the event space, the young people start recording, as they can hardly believe what is happening. However, when Jodin reaches out to capture them, everyone panics and starts looking for an escape route. During the confusion, some people end up being devoured, but Chris and his team arrive just in time to contain the attack. After approaching, the Major turns on all the lights on his aircraft in order to fry the troll, but to everyone's surprise, Jodin manages to resist the humans' attempts to turn him to stone and decides to fight back. When he realizes that his aircraft has suffered irreparable damage, Amir contacts his friend and says it has been an honor to serve alongside him. After witnessing the loss of his companion, Chris considers the idea of facing his enemy in an all-or-nothing battle, but when he realizes that he will put other people's lives in danger, he decides to retreat. At that moment, the man is forced to watch Jotun leave without being able to do anything to stop him, and the next morning, he accompanies Nora's team to the Dovra Mountains to visit the former prison of King Troll. Meanwhile, in the Gudbrandsdalen Valley, Lars and his dog feel the earth begin to shake and see a troll approaching. Upon seeing the old man, the creature makes no effort to change its path and tramples Lars' house. When she finally reaches her destination, Nora explains that the place was built by Christians as a trap for the Troll King. In an attempt to get rid of him, the humans captured the young prince to serve as bait, and when he appeared to retrieve his son, the Troll King was caught in the trap. However, legends say that the Troll King survived, and 3 years later, he managed to escape without his son. According to Nora, it is not known if this story is true, as the young prince's bones were never found. While standing looking at a cliff, the team sees a part of the stone wall come to life and discovers that this is where the prince has been hiding all these years. As she approaches him, Nora realizes that she is standing before the son of the Mountain King, and tries to show him that she is not a threat. In a few minutes, the woman wins the troll's trust and sings him the same song that woke Jotun. After introducing her friends to the prince, Nora asks for his help in talking to Jotun and uses a flare to attract the troll's attention. Upon seeing her, the creature quickly approaches, ready to attack the human when, suddenly, the prince appears. When he realizes that one of his kind intends to attack the human, Principe stands in front of her, but Jotun stomps hard on the ice, causing the surface to crack. At that moment, Nora realizes she is in danger and tries to flee, but is paralyzed when she sees her friend sinking into the frozen lake. After getting rid of Prince, Jotun walks toward the humans who tried to turn him to stone the night before, but Chris helps the scientist up, and they both manage to reach the helicopter in time. During takeoff, the team is almost shot down, but Jotun misses his shot, and Nora feels guilty for what happened to Prince. Hours later, Chris decides to make a stop to refuel his aircraft, and in the meantime, the scientists try to understand Jotun's behavior. After analyzing the troll's footprints, Marion concludes that he is on a pilgrimage to the north of the country, and Nora begins to suspect that he is on his way to Trondheim, formerly known as Nidaros. According to her, in her father's stories, Olav was primarily responsible for the destruction of the trolls, and at that time, Nidaros was the capital of Norway. After piecing this information together, Nora discovers Jotun's true intentions and claims that he is seeking revenge. If nothing is done to stop that creature, all the inhabitants of the north of the country will be wiped off the face of the earth and will pay the price for the actions of their ancestors. So, the group goes to Trondheim to meet Esther, and the woman accompanies them to Nidaros Cathedral, which was built between 1070 and 1300. According to Esther, through that cathedral, located in the heart of Norway, the church ruled the country with an iron fist. Even without knowing exactly the reason for the visit, the woman helps Nora and her friends find the tomb of Saint Olav, whose body was buried inside the church. Knowing the place like the back of her hand, Esther takes the visitors to the catacombs so they can search the site. The woman says that several people have gone mad searching that place for years without finding anything, so Nora and her friends have a big challenge ahead of them. However, after a few minutes of investigation, they find a chamber that Esther and several other people believed to be the king's tomb, but they were never able to get through that wall. While admiring the paintings, Andreas ends up removing a loose stone from the wall, and Esther is surprised by the discovery. The woman claims that those holes represent Olav's wounds, which were caused by Thor Hund in a fierce battle. Seeing those holes in the wall, Nora takes a wooden torch to fit inside and discovers the secret to moving the wall. With Andreas' help, she manages to turn the concrete gate and open the passage that leads to the tomb. As soon as the lid is removed, everyone has confirmation that this is the body of the former king, and Esther is moved to see him for the first time after so many years of searching. When she looks at Bayezing, the sword that was buried with the king, she notices that the blade remains intact, even after hundreds of years, and Chris says that this is because the sword is made of silver. According to the Major, this metal is not one of the best for making weapons, but the upside is that it does not rust, and therefore remains shiny. While searching the king's pockets, Nora finds the other missing half of the document containing the troll law, and Andreas immediately calls his wife to share the discovery. With Siggy's help, the team manages to scan the page, and finally, they can read the entire document. At that moment, the scientists realize that their interpretation was wrong, as Olav, during his reign, decreed that the trolls should not be expelled from that land. In an attempt to correct the injustices he had committed against those creatures, the king ceded the region of Jotunheimen so that they could have their own home. Upon discovering the truth, Nora comes to the conclusion that Olav was eliminated by the church itself, as the religious leaders of the time wanted to eliminate the trolls, and the only way to do so would be to override the king's laws. At that moment, the scientist realizes that Jotun does not intend to take revenge on Olav, but on all Norwegians who betrayed their king. That morning, all the news programs announced the tragedy caused by the troll, which took the lives of countless people. Videos showing images of the creature went viral on all social media, and the images shocked viewers, who are afraid to leave their homes. When he discovers that the monster is on its way to Trondheim, the Prime Minister decides to hold a press conference, where he states that his subordinates are doing everything possible to evacuate the entire population, as the city is lost. Under the general's orders, Chris prepares to leave the city with her team, as the enemy will arrive in Trondheim in about 2 hours. However, before reaching the helicopter, Nora and her friends realize that if Trondheim falls, the entire country will be destroyed, so they decide to stay and fight. The next step is to find out what kind of weapons are effective against the trolls, and Andreas states that church bells can be used to delay them. Reading her father's old diary, where he gathered information about the trolls, Nora discovers that biazing has been used for many years to fight these monsters. At that moment, Chris speaks up, saying that the only advantage of silver is that it does not corrode, so Nora decides to test it. She dips a silver dagger in holy water and uses the blade to cut the fragment she has kept with her for the past few years. In doing so, she sees the piece of earth break in half easily and realizes that the only way to eliminate a troll is with the help of holy water. However, to defeat Jotun, the team will need the help of more people, so Marion decides to ask the residents for help in the fight. There are few people left in the city, as the vast majority have already been evacuated, but even so, those who remain decide to join the battle. With the help of the military personnel in the city, Chris builds traps to put an end to the enemy and empties the cathedral's entire supply of holy water. Minutes later, when all the soldiers are already in position in front of the cathedral to start the war that is to come, Jotun arrives in town and his footsteps shake everything around him. After destroying a building near the church, the troll is stunned by the sound of the bells, and while the monster covers his ears, Chris orders his men to start shooting. In an attempt to stop the attack, Jotun uproots a tree and throws it at the bell tower. Luckily, Esther and Andreas manage to escape in time before the bell falls on their heads, and the troll advances toward his enemies. When he sees his allies in danger, Chris orders them to retreat and waits patiently for Jotun to approach. As soon as the monster approaches the barrier, the Major activates the bombs and causes the gallons to explode, but the holy water is not enough to eliminate Jotun. Realizing that their plan has failed, Nora and her friends decide to flee, but suddenly they hear the prince's roar and realize that he is still alive. When he senses the presence of another troll approaching, Jotun interrupts the chase and goes after his greatest opponent. The problem is that Jotun is bigger, older, and more experienced in battle, so the prince doesn't stand a chance in that fight. Concerned about what might happen to her friend, Nora decides to intervene, and Marion says that the only way to stop the big guy is to pour holy water on him. Within minutes of the battle, the prince begins to lose his strength and realizes that he is facing an invincible opponent. When he realizes that only one bomb remains, Andreas decides to fly over the lake in a helicopter to try to throw the gallon into the creature's mouth. Meanwhile, Nora starts shooting at Jotun in an attempt to distract him so that he stops attacking the prince. After grabbing a weapon, Marion decides to join her friend while Chris flies over the battlefield. During the journey, they almost lose the canister, but Andreas manages to recover it. The problem is that he ended up dropping the detonator, and now the only solution is to detonate the bomb manually. At that moment, Chris hands his friend a hand grenade and tells him that the pin must be pulled seconds before the bomb falls into the monster's mouth. After a few minutes of having his head trampled and being unable to breathe, the prince stops moving, and Nora concludes that he has drowned. Seeing Jotun walking towards her, Marion runs away, but Nora decides to keep shooting, as she doesn't want to abandon her friend again. Just as the woman is about to be crushed, the helicopter approaches and Andreas calls his wife. He is determined to do whatever it takes to save his country and ensure that his son has the chance to live in a safe place. However, to do so, Andreas will have to sacrifice himself, so he contacts Siggy to say goodbye. After talking to his wife for the last time, the scientist hugs the gallon and jumps into the monster's mouth. During the fall, Andreas removes the pin from the grenade, and seconds later, an explosion occurs inside Jotun. Immediately, the holy water spreads over the troll's body and it begins to disintegrate. Seeing his enemy weakened, the prince rises from the bottom of the lake and rips out Jotun's heart with his own hands. At that moment, the monster's body begins to disintegrate and he is finally defeated. Relieved to know that her country is safe, Nora begins to cry and deeply mourn the perishment of Andreas, who sacrificed his life so that millions of Norwegians, including his son, could have a future. Months later, Leonard is born, and Siggy relies on the support of her friends to give him the best life possible. After completing her mission, Nora returns to her isolated cabin in the mountains and, from time to time, receives visits from her friend Troll. So what did you think of this movie? Leave it in the comments below. And if you liked the video, like and subscribe